I have a question for you. In which country do you think totalitarianism is most prevalent? China is probably one of them, where a good half of the Western internet is banned, and WeChat, where citizens chat, deliver food and pay at the shops, basically their whole life, is monitored by the internet police. Or take North Korea, where not just the digital life of citizens is under the watchful eye of Big Brother, but the real one as well. There, the government does not tolerate pluralism, bans independent media, civil society organizations, and trade unions, and systematically denies all basic freedoms, including freedom of speech, public assembly, association, and religion. And that is, of course, not the whole list. What if I told you that in the near future there is huge potential to stand alongside these countries for Russia? The war triggered many events, both the exodus of people from the country and the subsequent mobilization of the population to the front. One of the next steps was a mechanism devised by the authorities to control people's destinies at a finger's reach, as in a computer interface. Just so you understand, we will not be operating on assumptions and media headlines now. On April the 14th, the President of Russia signed the law on changes to the military service, but regardless of the name, its impact will affect the whole state system of the country. One of the most pressing questions on this topic for every Russian is electronic draft notices, how they will be sent out and what they are all about. As you look into this scheme, you will understand for yourself the enormity of the coming changes, because other countries may just as well adopt this. To begin with, a couple of words about how conscription had worked previously. The recruitment office sent a physical draft notice to a citizen on which he had to sign for it and then report to the recruitment office. An important role here was played by the signature on receiving the notice, which obliged the conscript to appear on request and gave the authorities an official reason to prosecute the citizen if they failed to show up for the draft. Obviously, in order to avoid all this, people ignored the receiving and signing of the draft notice in every way possible, ran away, evaded, lived in rented flats, so that there was no official reason for the military enlistment office to chase them. And now for the grand changes straight out of the law. At the top of the list is the military register. What is this register all about? Let's start from the base. We have some Ivan in real life. Ivan, like a USB drive, carries a lot of information from genetic to government one. Now, the authorities need to create a digital cast of Ivan. Not a full one, of course, but just with bits of information important to the state. To be precise, it needs surname, first name, patronymic, if there is one, date of birth, gender, full passport details, individual insurance account number, taxpayer identification number, place of residence, second citizenship or residence permit, military registration code and place of registration, information about enrollment or removal from the military service, information about the military registration document, position, place of work and employer, education information, health information, code of record and state information resources, whether there are grounds for deferment or exemption from conscription, and other information that is determined by the Russian government. These are the small bits of data they need to get from Ivan and upload into the military register. Yeah, now we've got a digital Ivan in the base. Half the job is done. Now we have to figure out who runs the registry. Well, that's easy. The military registry is run by the Military Enlistment Office. And when the military enlistment office has uploaded Ivan, it can add to him information about the status of the relationship with the office. Namely, has he been served with a draft summon? Did he receive it? Did he show up or not show up? Is there a valid reason for not showing up? Whether sanctions have been taken against him for failing to appear? Is there an administrative or criminal charge? Has he complained in court? So, now we have a record of Ivan's relationship with the state on military matters, with the military enlistment office overseeing the whole affair. This too has been sorted out. And now the juiciest thing. The electronic draft notices, how they are sent out, how they are handed in, and all that. Look, there's another register that comes up. A register of draft notices sent or served. If you're wondering why there should be a separate register, the point of the draft notice register is that it will be public. In other words, you will be able to go and look at yourself or anyone else to whom a draft notice has been sent, as well as all the data on the summons, such as the date it was sent and the date they were due to arrive. Well, it's not technically done yet, just for your information. And now, pay attention. A draft notice is considered to have been sent when Ivan appears on the draft notice register. Remember at the beginning I said that the fact of signing a draft notice was important. An important role here was played by the signature on receiving the notice, which obliged the conscript to appear on request. Now, once a draft notice appears in the registry, it is deemed to have been sent to Ivan. The rest is small potatoes. You may be wondering when a draft notice is deemed served. So look, once a citizen is added to the register, two processes are started to notify the citizen. The first process is the usual one. Ivan receives a paper notice to sign. The unusual thing here is that the notice will now be deemed served even if their mother picks up the registered letter in the post.
Yeah, well, maybe we've gone on holiday as a family for a month.
Okay, let's say, but I said that two parallel processes are running. The second is the electronic draft notice, which is deemed to be served when it is posted in the personal account of the relevant information resource. Once again, it is deemed to be served not when opening the email, not when opening the notification, but stupidly, when the information resource will post it in their account. This is considered that they have received the draft notice. Though the law does not specify a particular information resource, it most likely will be governmental service at first. But today it is a state service, and then they will get to social networks. For example, a Russian clone of Facebook. What's more convenient? You go to Facebook, get a draft notice, and there you are immediately directed to Russian YouTube, where the young generation of propagandists will tell you that the draft notice is from the Tsar in the name of the good annihilation of the fascist Yankees. Beautiful, isn't it?
Okay, let's say I haven't used internet services at all for 20 years, I don't have personal accounts there, and we're on holiday. How am I going to get a draft notice?
And for the clever ones out there, there's a line like this. That is, even if you've been living in the forest, even if you leave the forest to go on holiday to a neighboring farm for a month, 7 days after placing the draft notice in the register of such notices, it is considered to have been served. It does not matter whether the notice came to you or not, or whether it appears in your personal account. The notice is considered served 7 days after the military commissar adds the digital Ivan to the register of draft notices.
7 days.
And yes, you are correct in assuming that one can find out about it after the fact. Well, let's imagine that the military commissar presses the send button, but the letters don't reach the post. The information system fails, 7 days pass, and on the 8th day, Ivan, without knowing anything, decides to go to Turkey, and at the border control they tell him, "You are banned from leaving." It is this restriction, which the authorities disguise as temporary measures, that comes after 7 days.
So 7 days to this very hour? My watch broke. How am I going to know the exact hour?
In this subject of electronic draft notices, the main point is not about electronic notices at all. The point is that there is now a register which automatically determines the status of notices service, and after the so-called service, a person is not allowed to leave the country. They can only go to the enlistment office for further disposition. All these so-called temporary measures are implemented only for one purpose: to create such unpleasant conditions that citizens have to show up at the military registration and enlistment office themselves, as if out of despair. Since the vast majority is not going to flee the country, for obvious reasons, if Ivan does not show up without a good reason in 20 days after the date specified in the notice, and I believe it is roughly 27 days after the notice hits the register, the state adds more reasons for Ivan to come to the enlistment office. Ivan gets a ban on registering as self-employed and sole proprietor, a ban on buying and apparently selling a flat, a suspension of driving license of all categories, a ban on the purchase and apparently sale of motor vehicles, and a ban on obtaining loans. That is, if Ivan really did not know that he had been served a notice, he would be informed by the traffic cop who stopped him, or the bank manager if Ivan tried to take out a loan. Just so you understand, getting a draft notice does not always mean that one will be taken away to fight. Ivan may be called to simply clarify documents, for example. You can see the full list of reasons on your screen. But even then, all restrictions on travel, on civil rights, will also be imposed. And yes, there is a good chance that after the first notice, you will be given another one, this time no longer to clarify documents. Generally speaking, this law on the military register seems to be like a state kraken that entangles all areas of your life, from which there is no escaping. Again, this is not a liberal blogger's blather to gather views, it comes directly from the law. In Article 4, we find instructions to state authorities on what should be handed over to the Military Enlistment Office in the new Registry of Military Records and who should do it. The Ministry of Internal Affairs transmits data on those who have moved to a new place of residence or live in a place where they are not officially registered. Also data on those who have received a passport. So we shall congratulate the new Russians. Get a Russian passport and immediately get on the Register of Military Registration. The Ministry of Internal Affairs will also be able to provide citizens with letters for military registration. I wonder how they even have time to catch crooks and fight corruption, as well as to ensure people's attendance at enlistment office. The Federal Tax Service must provide the enlistment office with data on civil status documents, births, marriages, adoptions, paternity, name changes, and deaths. Courts must transmit their decisions on citizens to the military register within 2 weeks. The Russian pension fund should hand over data on disability status, and by the way, this is one of the good ideas in this law. After all, now a police officer will not be knocking on a disabled person's door. Medical institutions should give the regional authorities, and then regional authorities give the data on the state of health to the Military Enlistment Office, which is also good, because in theory a person with 20/500 eyesight should not have the police knocking on their door either. In the same logic, the different educational institutions send data to understand whether Ivan is a bachelor, who is not legally to be drafted, or a postgraduate student. There was one paragraph that was genuinely hilarious to me. When I read the law, I generally understood the role of all the state institutions in this scheme, why they were needed and what data they could provide. Then I read further and suddenly there's Central Electoral Commission. At first I wondered what important information is there, and what is the relationship of the Central Electoral Commission to ordinary citizens? It appears this was not about ordinary citizens. It is about MPs and other officials of different ranks, from federal to municipal level, about heads of cities and, of course, their deputies. The Military Enlistment Office must distinguish between an ordinary Ivan, who should be crushing fascists, and Mr. Ivan, who sits in his office and pushes correct buttons at the meetings. Why separate Mr. Ivan from the ordinary Ivan in the military register? Well, the system shall protect its cogs in order to function properly, shall it not? The amendments conclude with the splendid clause that the government may expand the list of information about people to be collected in the future. The attentive viewer already realizes that the law explicitly states that the digital dictatorship will only evolve over time, and that the state kraken will only increase the number of its tentacles. Now we will get to the practical part, where it will begin to work, technically. Let's start with what we have officially. The agency in charge of the digital kraken is called, who would have thought, the Ministry of Digital Development. The ministry has said that the military register will not be operational until the autumn conscription, that is, not before the 1st of October. Of course, it is hard to believe that in Russia, steeped in corruption, any government projects are being completed on time. Though in this case, I'd say it's both true and not. My opinion is that they are unlikely to make it by October, but that this is serious work, not declaratory as usual, I'm sure. The motive is different here, and the level of responsibility is maximum. Now, for example, the military enlistment offices are transferring the paper files of military personnel to computers. Yes, it may drag on, but, unlike other fantastical statements, the authors of this law, who I personally believe are not the ones who publicly take the heat for others, the real authors of the law, understand that the creation and accumulation of databases will not be simultaneous. You still need to arrange the collection and synchronization of rows and columns in spreadsheets between agencies, prepare software, and simply teach people to tap the buttons. It is explicitly stated in the law that they pass the law now, and if the information systems are not yet finalized, they still impose restrictions on travel and civil rights to the extent that they can. That is, they will reach out to those they can reach. Now this system is being tried out on conscript soldiers, those who are obliged to do a year of military service, and then over time they may not even declare a partial mobilization. It's simple. The front requires 100,000 Ivans. They set up filters in the register, for example for people without higher education, add them to the register of sent draft notices, and if they do not show up, worsen their life in the country. Keep in mind that over time this list of impairments may increase. This, by the way, is also in the law, which says that the regions themselves will be able to further restrict civil rights. Well, comes the presidential envoy, who is, by the way, a proxy between Putin and the heads of regions, an integral element of the power vertical that we talked about in these videos. So comes the presidential envoy to the governor of some Omsk region and says, "You have a shortage of draftees. Let's do something." And the governor looks at the list of evaders and deprives them, for example, of a personal income tax refund or some social benefits. On the one hand, there are indeed positive aspects to the new law, such as the fact that disabled people and fathers with many children will not get drafted. But on the other hand, the state has shown its priorities. Military conscription is more important than economic activity and population demography. Digitalization is a great thing. With the help of this tool, it would be possible to sharply increase secondary education in the country, which is at the level of the 1990s. It would be possible to monitor the effectiveness of the execution of state contracts, thereby saving money for the budget, obtaining quality services for the country, and simply eradicating corruption. It would be possible to understand exactly down to the individual how many life-saving drugs need to be procured. The budget could be redistributed fairly, creating a regional economy, but all this was of no interest to the current government. Its priority is to send as many people to war on the Commander-in-Chief's orders, or to do whatever else the Commander-in-Chief wants. The law itself states that the register will only grow. This is evident from the fact that the data on the digital Ivan can be expanded. The types of restrictions on human rights can be expanded, and such changes as replacing the wording "and patronymic" with "and patronymic if any," indicating that it could be folk of other nations as well, and the fact that the Interior Ministry must add to the register those who have received a Russian passport indicate that the military reserves must be filled with everyone possible. Such an approach was, however, defined as far back as last September. The trend is set. Ivan's basic constitutional rights can be curtailed without a second thought if the Commander-in-Chief so wishes, and this is the country's top priority. The image of the coming Russia is that of North Korea, with the digitalization of China and sanctions of Iran. Whereas before the war, the Russian population and the state had an unspoken agreement whereby ordinary people were left out as long as they stayed out of decision-making and resource allocation, aka politics, now this contract has changed. Now even the most silent patriot can be taken away or have his rights curtailed. You know who to share this video with. We send out our own draft notices filled with utmost gratitude to the draftees on our Patreon. Thank you for staying with us. And I'm the researcher.